Hello. There used to be a time when deep theories and spectacular insights populated the field of propaganda research, including agenda-setting theory or book written by Chomsky. However, Web 2.0 type of communication did not exist at that time. So propaganda was viewed as a phenomenon in which individuals merely received messages from mass media without or hardly circulation any messages among other individuals. Accordingly, the researchers were focused on mass media and its influence, biases, and so on. The advent of online social network created a great difference both in communication and in research concerned with it. There was a realization that diffusion of information through interpersonal communications has become very powerful, with some individuals being able to broadcast widely and some pieces of information going viral. The empirical literature pertaining the diffusion of information through Twitter and Facebook surged, and the new and important science of information retrieval emerged. However, there is a paradox with this burst of research. Despite all the prevalent awareness regarding the increased role of individuals, there are no models that are focused on individual behavior during information battles. Assume that a controversial issue enters public agenda. People discuss it, they tend to get harsh with each other, and researchers witness more polarization than before. Afterwards, this controversial issue is no longer in public agenda. And what is the long-term impact on the individuals? Do they stay highly polarized, or they relax back to the initial state? Consider the population in which two parties, the left party, party R, and the left party, party L, and the right party, party R, are engaged in a propaganda battle. At any moment of time, each individual approves one of the party and disapproves the other. Individuals communicate, they share their approvals, so they may shift their support to the other party under the influence of propaganda broadcasting and opinion of other individuals. Actually, they may switch their partisanship back and forth an unlimited number of times. And the number of supporters of each party varies over time. And this process is called propaganda battle. The precursors to these models are single rumor models. And the first one of them was proposed by Dalai Kendall and Mackie Thompson. In the most general term, here we assume that we have a closed group of individuals. And at any moment, some of them, called spreaders, have a certain valuable piece of information, and they spread it among other individuals. Both of this model lead to great square conclusion that the rumor encompasses the same proportion of the population at the end of its circulation. It's due to a mechanism of rumor suppression. We assume that when two spreaders interact, they both, in Dalai Kendall, or only one of them, in Mackie Thompson, come to the idea that it is not news anymore and is no longer worth spreading further. They become stiflers, and at the same time, some individuals stay ignorant of the whole rumor. But this model fails to distinguish between propagating viral and harmful pieces of information. The recent years were remarkable for growing interest in issues related to propaganda. And here you can see the annual numbers of research papers with the exact phrase fake news. You can see the continuous growth of these numbers. And closer to our model. The decision-making mechanism is based on Reshevsky's neurological scheme. The outcome of this mechanism is individual support of the left or of the right party. Mathematically speaking, it is a continuous scalar function of time. And we can imagine this process as the axis of latent political position. Here, positive values refer to support of the party R, and negative values refer to support of the party L. During information battle, this latent political position may shift along this axis. And when it crosses 0 point, it means that individual begins supporting the other party. The latent political position is a sum of two components. It is the attitude and the dynamic component. An attitude is a person's predisposition towards a given object. It depends on social experience and status. And it is important for the approach that we suppose that an attitude is permanent or at least long-lasting. Also, we assume that it is developed before the beginning of propaganda battle. And the distribution of individuals' attitudes in a polarized society is two-peaked function. The dynamic component changes due to informational factors, such as propaganda and interpersonal communications. So, phi varies across individuals and is the same over time, and psi is the same across individuals and varies over time. If phi plus psi is greater than 0, an individual supports party R, and if phi plus psi is less than 0, the individual supports party A. So the growth of phi is in favor of party R and vice versa. Three notes here should be highlighted. These variables cannot be measured directly. Yet, in applying model of this type to concretely defined problems, we can estimate some of combinations of these parameters from observable data. The intensities of parties broadcasting are constant values during propaganda battle, is just to simplify, and the model should not be confused with the median voter model from social choice theory. In public choice theory, we assume that each individual has their own preferences with no relation to political parties, and there may be any number of these parties. And the political position, it is the individual statement. For example, military expenditure should be 3% of GDP. And an individual votes for the party whose statement is the closest to their own 3%. But in our model, we have only two parties. So we consider political position as their position with regard to or between these parties. And personal attitudes are their devotedness or attachment to the party. So there was some processes inside individuals, and there are some properties of the whole population. Similarity breeds connection. So in our workhorse model, we consider two groups of individuals, and each member prefers to communicate with other members of the same group. Selective exposure is that individuals select the media they are exposed to. The key postulate in politically motivated selective exposure is that an individual prefer to expose to the media that, that support their own beliefs and views. There is also another kind of selective exposure, which is related to individuals' social or demographic status. In other words, a media outlet has been utilized by certain political or social groups. For example, it can be utilized by women or blue-collar workers and so on. And in our model, we consider two groups of individuals that are differently exposed. Polarization is a big topic of political science. And in the most of our experiments, we consider that distribution of attitudes of individuals in both groups are such that these groups are predisposed towards different parties. And note that growth of polarization means that individuals become more attached to their parties and their doubts and hesitations are reduced. An echo chamber is a social pattern wherein some people have beliefs or views that are distinctly different from those that are common within the broader population. And these people preferably communicate with one another, and through this they manage to maintain, reinforce, or amplify these beliefs or views. An echo chamber appears due to homophily, selective exposure, and polarization, as these factors provide reinforcement. Once formed, an echo chamber maintains itself through these factors. And for us, an echo chamber is a type of stable solution where the minority of population continues supporting one of the party despite the domination of the other. And this is the basic model. There is neither selective exposure nor homophily, just to explain the process of decision making. So as you remember, if phi plus psi is greater than 0, an individual supports party R. So the number of party R supporters is given by this formula. And the number of party S supporters is given by this formula. The wall factor in favor of R is CR plus BR. Here, BR is the intensity of propaganda of party R, and C is a positive constant describing the degree in activism in arguing. And the wall factor in favor of party L is Cn plus Bn. The difference between these two factors is the driving force for Psi. And here, A is greater than 0, and the term minus A Psi describes the process of relaxation. It means that if we remove or pro-R and pro-L factors from this model, Psi gradually vanishes, and Psi plus Phi tends to just Phi, and that means that all individuals relax back to their initial state. After putting R and L into this equation, we get the final model, and the initial condition has the following form. Our model is the generalization of the basic model. Here, indices 1 and 2 refer to the group. For example, BR1 is the intensity of propaganda of party R in the first group. And gamma is homophily. If gamma is equal to 1, it means that there is not interactions between members of the different groups. And if gamma is equal to 0.5, which means that individuals don't have preferences in communication. The distribution of attitudes is Cauchy distribution. And this shift is polarization. As you can see, the first group tends to be is predisposed towards party L, and the second group is predisposed towards party R. This model was studied analytically and numerically. And analytical consideration shows that there can be 1 to 9 equilibrium states, depending on the number of intersection of S-shaped and N-shaped curves. And in the most complex case, there is 9 equilibrium states. 4 of them are stable nodes, 4 of them are saddles, and there is 1 unstable node. Let's consider this upper right stable node. Here, Psi1 is greater than 0. That means that R1 is greater than L1, and Psi2 is greater than 0. That means that R2 is greater than L2. So the party R gets majority in the both groups. And here we have an echo chamber that comprises individuals who support the left party. If we consider this lower right stable node, here Psi1 is less than 0. That means that R1 is less than L1, and Psi2 is greater than 0. That means that R2 is greater than L2. So the party L gets majority in the first group, and the party R gets majority in the second group. By the way, this majority in the second group is smaller than in previous case, because this point is slightly to the left from this point. If these groups are equal in size, it means that each of the parties enjoys the support of approximately half of population. But if the second group is less, the majority of population support party L, and here we have an echo chamber comprising the supporters of the right party. It is majority of the second group and minority of the first group. If we vary P and gamma, we see that the number of equilibrium states changes. And it is important that in a highly polarized society, we have only 1 equilibrium state. That means that, for example, initial condition doesn't affect the final result. Also, a short-term boost in media propaganda would not result in any long-term outcome. And this is the illustration how the number of equilibrium states changes. For example, let's vary gamma from 0.91 to 0.81. You see that some equilibrium states, for example, 4 and 5, begin coincide. And then if gamma is equal, for example, 0.79, they vanish. At the same time, some other equilibrium states just move. And this is an experiment with selective exposure. Here we consider the population, which isn't polarized in attitude. The first group tends to be exposed by the left-wing media, and the second group tends to be exposed by the right-wing media. The first group is 4 times larger than the second, and the communication inside the groups is 9 times more active than between different groups. This weak intergroup communication makes us think that the first group supports the party L and the second group supports the party R. But it isn't so simple. Depending on the initial condition, there can be 2 different cases. The first case is large echo chamber comprising the supporter of party R. It is 18% of the world population, 3.6% of the first group, and 75.5% of the second group. In the other case of small echo chamber, it is only 6.5% of the world population. 3.5% of the first group, it's approximately the same, and 18.3% of the second group. The initial conditions are also important in situations when we consider, for example, the distribution of attitudes. That distribution of attitudes is asymmetric in favor of party R, for example, while initial condition is strongly favorable for the left party. Sometimes an initial condition is more powerful than attitudes, and sometimes vice versa. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions?
One question. Here you studied the stability of the point of unstable point.
Stability?
First.
When we provide parameters?
Yes.
Oh, no.
One question.
Is there some data to change this model?
This model, no. But we have another model that is based on empirical data.
What is it?
It is the model of the same type, but it is a model of individuals' attention to political event. It works.
How do you change the model if you deal with not 2 parties, but with 3 or 4 or 5?
This model
What
is
should you change?
this model is only for 2 parties because we consider that we have one variable. If it is positive, an individual support the right party, and if it's negative, the individual support the left party. So that's all.